political inclination?
Political inclinations.
None at all.
This is why I'm here, because, it's important that I wave this little lefty flag and I get my lefty buddies to use Bitcoin as well.
What did you think about
Explain
this?
to you why you're wrong. So you're basically the Roger Ver of Nostr.
Do you know the worst part about that is when I built the first Nostr Twitter client, but I'm not a very good developer, so I had to get Feardraft to proof it for me and improve it. So I paid him. So I was also the first person to invest in Nostr too. So that's Roger Ver's line. I was the first person to invest in Bitcoin. I've got Bitcoin.com.
I don't think that's Bitcoin's fault.
They're probably just going to stab us in the back.
If you want to get to the top of the power hierarchy, it's sort of have to be a psychopath. You get there by promising a lot and not delivering on anything. So it's inherently corrupt. I don't have very much hope for that.
It's very much a black box. When you apply for a grant, they don't give you a reason why. However, they think their job, which I think is worse, is that they have an agenda and then they start to fund projects for the direction in which they want Bitcoin to go. And that is really fishy.
That is super, super scary.
Yeah.
To me, that's like the most dangerous thing. These are good questions. Like,
They're hard.
You have to think. Yeah, they're hard, but they're good.
Oh God, don't ask me that question.
All views expressed by the host or guests are solely their own opinions. Nothing stated in this podcast should be considered a specific endorsement to make any particular investment or follow any specific strategy.
Welcome to All in Bitcoin, Knut and Ben. Today we're going to talk about power and Bitcoin. But first, let's get to know you a little bit better. Ready?
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Names, occupations, and political inclinations.
Go on, you first.
Yeah, my name is Knut Svanholm. I wrote a couple of books about Bitcoin and one book about praxeology, which is the underlying science to Austrian economics. Austrian economics is one part of that. I do a podcast called the Bitcoin Infinity Show, and the thing I'm working on at the moment is actually some music. I haven't done that in a while, but I used to record music and write songs back in the day, and I'm like taking up that hobby again. So that's one of the projects. And I travel around the world and give talks about Austrian economics and Bitcoin at conferences like this one here in beautiful Vienna. I've done that for the past at least 5 years and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. Political inclination?
Inclinations.
None at all. Like as little politics as possible. I don't like politics. I think it should go away, I'd say.
benarc. So I work on a couple of different software projects, Bits and Nostr, a lot of Nostr stuff. We have Nostr.com and we were involved quite early on in Nostr. I was originally a teacher. I used to teach kids with quite severe behavioural difficulties. A lot of youth offending works. We used to work with kids in youth offending. And when I was a teacher, there was a period where the local government were slashing a bunch of jobs, and the kids we taught at that time needed the support we gave them. It was really important for them, and we did a lot of good work too. And they were in a union, and they set up a picket line. And I drove into work one day. Before I knew, I crossed the picket line, so I'm in fact a scab. And at that point, I realised that I didn't want to be on the wrong side of history again, and that in that position again, I would want to be on the picket line as opposed to breaking the picket line. And that's when my politics probably shifted more towards the left. But similarly, I think politics in general and the way we do politics is incredibly corrupt and horrendous. So I kind of want the entire system to be upended and turned upside down. But I think that's why we're Bitcoiners and where we found a lot of common ground.
Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "Become who you are." Have you been? Who have you become?
Well, I mean, I like inadvertently became a developer. So I like kind of make a community. I like people being able to build their own things. I think it's very important for autonomy that you have control. I think there's different possible futures which exist. And there's one dystopian future where we don't really control anything and we're controlled. And there's one where we have control over things, we have autonomy. And I think it's a big part of kind of the Bitcoin thesis is more personal responsibility and control. And I think being able to build your own hardware, software is an important part of that. So I wanted to encourage that in Bitcoin. So there's a couple of us at the time who were making stuff in Bitcoin. It's a very small community. And then we made a concerted effort to get people to build more hardware. From that, the Bits project grew out of that. And it's been a great project. It's been really fun because we've kind of built a decent community, and it's always been builder-centric. So it's helped empowered people to build stuff and bootstrapped a lot of businesses and within the Bitcoin ecosystem.
And you, personally, who have you become?
I think it's very much kind of like a journey. And I've never really wanted to say that, I have an answer for anything, really, because everything we kind of take for granted as truth is probably wrong. Like historically, women were property and child labor was fine and slavery was fine. And now probably a lot of the things we think are wrong. So I think I've become more aware of that it's an important process to try and learn more and then engage with people who you may think have contrary ideas to yours, and then actually find truth in their ideas and then kind of synthesize that into a greater truth. So that kind of dialectic process. And that's why I'm in a lucky position, obviously in Bitcoin, being politically left. I'm surrounded by these esteemed Austrian economists. And to begin with, I thought, well, what a ridiculous ideology. But then more and more, I realized the things they're arguing for make sense. And so many of them are just nice people. So why are they nice people if this is a bad ideology? And there's a reason for it, because it's not entirely bad and a lot of it makes sense. So it's synthesizing those ideas.
And what about you, Knut? Who have you become?
Finding myself. So the way I see it, your career is more about finding what you don't want to do than finding what you want to do. And you throw things at the wall and you see what sticks. And that's how you move forward in life. And I think the same is true for the self. It's more about finding who you're not than finding who you are. And that's the path to finding your true voice and leaning into what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. You've seen those Japanese Venn diagrams called an ikigai. So you're what is it? What makes you money? What you enjoy doing? What's good for others? And there's a fourth circle there somewhere too. But I would say to become a Bitcoiner in the first place, you sort of have to have this self-reflecting personality. I think this community is full of people who self-reflect and who are willing to eat humble pie every now and then and learn something new and realize they were wrong and had false assumptions about a great many things. And I think that's a continuous process rather than somewhere you end up. I'm grateful to be here at the developer conference for once, and keen to learn. Already learned a bunch of stuff here. I think life is a continuous journey of devouring more and more wisdom. But yeah, finding yourself is a lot about dropping your ego and realizing that there isn't much self there. Like the less self there, or the less ego there is, the more useful yourself becomes, or something like that.
Who pulled you into Bitcoin?
That's a good question. So a lot of people within the Bitcoin ecosystem, they'll say it was like the dark markets or Silk Road. For me, what really sold Bitcoin, we were quite lucky in the UK because we had a positive news cycle, whereas in the US, it was like, this is drug dealer money. In the UK, we had the BBC and we had some tech correspondent on the BBC, and they'd be going, oh, there's a new thing called Bitcoin. And they're quite excited about it. So we all heard about it quite early on. But for me, it was really WikiLeaks. So when the US government lent on Visa, so they couldn't accept donations for WikiLeaks, and they used Bitcoin to circumvent it to get funding for WikiLeaks. For me, I thought, wow, what's this thing? What's this thing where governments can't stop such a great thing like WikiLeaks having sponsorship? And that really sold Bitcoin. Then I was like, to me, and then our question is, when did you become Bitcoin? I don't know. It's like a big blurry period, isn't it? But I think that's when it really kind of came home to me. And it wasn't for many years later that I really kind of got involved in it. And then on the developing side as well. But yeah, that was the moment where it really popped out as a useful tool.
And to you?
Yeah, I agree with the blurry line. I don't remember a specific moment where the aha moment happened. But in 2016, I was interested enough to do an online course at a university in a Greek university and get some kind of a diploma in this stuff. And I just became more and more interested in that. And Bitcoin led me down the whole libertarian rabbit holes too, and the Austrian economic side of things. And there's just so much that you didn't know that you didn't know. And once you stumble into these rabbit holes, they're like bottomless. So you can just keep on stumbling down them.
You were first a Bitcoiner, and then that's what led you to the...
Yeah, I was aware of the Mises Institute, and I was always freedom-minded. I was always like the idea of a smaller and smaller state and stuff like that. But I didn't know that there was actually a methodology to explain this to people and first principles. To me, finding praxeology was sort of like, I always liked the hard sciences in school because the social sciences always had this wait but why feeling to them. Like we were just supposed to take things at face value, that they told us we need to pay taxes and all that. But maths was just, if you figured it out, you knew what was supposed to go on the other side of the equals sign. So when I discovered praxeology, I had the same feeling, like, oh, holy shit, there is actually a way to do social sciences which is absolutely sound, and it's based around the methodology where you start from certain assumptions or axioms or first principles, and the whole point of it is that, yeah, you can argue against this, but in doing so, you run, by the very act of arguing, you run into a logical contradiction. So this is, and there's so much to be unpacked there. This is also the basis for what's called Hoppian argumentation ethics. So if you argue with me, by the very act of arguing, you have sort of admitted that I own my body and that you own yours, and that argumentation is a preferable conflict resolving method. And if we come to the conclusion that if you're the taxman, that you're not allowed to take my stuff and you take it anyway, that's when it's not an argument anymore, but bullying. So Austrian economics is also a lot about distinctions and like really defining the words so they don't get muddled too much. And keep on learning.
Isn't there a criticism with praxeology?
There's a lot of criticism.
Correct me if I'm wrong, from a lot of schools of economics, that it's very hard to prove like the outcomes in praxeology, because it's maths-based, isn't it?
It's not maths-based at all.
Logic-based.
It's based on a priori truths, meaning that empiricism cannot confirm nor deny any of the theories. And this is why all the other scientists don't like it, because it rejects the scientific method altogether. It's just deductive reasoning.
Can it be called a science if it's non-provable? Because that's a big part of what science is.
But there are two branches of sciences, a priori and a posteriori sciences. A posteriori meaning empirical sciences, which is very good for physics and such. A priori sciences are, for instance, logic is an a priori science, and in a sense mathematics too, because it's based on logic. We know that 1 + 1 = 2 because we define what 2 is by adding 1 and 1 together. So praxeology is a little different. I mean, mathematically you can a priori say that two parallel lines will never cross, but it's not because you cannot argue against it. It's because of it's a slightly different framework for why you come to the conclusions you do. But the very basic axiom of praxeology is human action is purposeful behavior. And if you want to try to debunk that or argue against it, you have to do that on purpose. Therefore, human action is purposeful behavior.
Don't you have so there's some examples maybe with game theory like the prison dilemma, for example, like it would make sense that everyone acts for their own self-interest, but yet whenever it's run like with humans, they tend to act irrationally.
Yeah, I'd say praxeology does not concern itself with game theory. Game theory is it's a branch of mathematics, and it can tell you what the rational and the irrational choice is. For instance, prisoner's dilemma, if you're playing it once, you're incentivized to rat the other guy out. But if you play it over and over again, the best strategy is something called tit for tat, where you're supposed to cooperate until the other guy defects, and then you pay back with the same. So it's eye for an eye, and then trust the other guy again, and you can mathematically prove that. But game theory it's not included in praxeology, and rational in the praxeological sense just means on purpose. It says nothing about if it was a sound decision or a good decision or a bad decision.
So because a lot of the outcome with the game theory of prison dilemma when it runs, which is why Nash actually didn't like it in his later life, particularly it being applied to markets and rational behavior in markets, because he thought it encouraged psychopathic behavior. But the phenomenon was that quite often when they would run it, that the humans would trust the other human, which they shouldn't do. It's like they shouldn't trust them. Humans can be irrational sometimes because of the way in which they feel about other humans. Would praxeology account for human action as irrational because it also includes how humans feel about other humans?
We wouldn't say irrational, because we use the word rational in praxeology just to describe that a decision was made on purpose. And also, the other schools of economics who take like game theory into account, a praxeologist would not call that economics at all, but I would call it like economic assessment maybe, or predictions. And you can do those and they can be useful, but they're not like the hard science of economics. I can a priori prove that a minimum wage law will lead to equal or lower employment by just reasoning myself to that position. All else being equal. There's a lot of all else being equal scenarios in Austrian economics to like isolate the phenomenon which you're trying to find a truth about. But mixing these things up, that's where the danger starts. Like as soon as you incorporate things like game theory or this power law theory and Bitcoin's price and stuff, at the end of the day, all of that stuff it is not an exact science, because at the end of the day, the actor is a human being who acts with agency and free will and does whatever he does because of his own reasons. You can never know the actual reasons as to why a human being does something. For instance, you don't know if I'm explaining this to you because I want to explain it to you, or because I want to explain it to the listeners of the pod, or if I'm just like rambling. You can know that I did it, but you cannot know why. And you can also know that there must be some kind of value hierarchy in my brain which made me like explain these things right now instead of drinking water, for instance. And I'll take a sip of water to illustrate that this became my priority in the moment.
It's very appealing because it simplifies things just down to human action.
Yeah.
But then also kind of restricts. It's almost like, what's the point in studying, the anthropology of humans, like why they act in certain ways, why they do certain things, whether
I'd say it's to me it's less of an ideology and more of a tool, or like a lens to view the world through, to get a more accurate picture of what's actually going on in the world and why.
Like, would you call it a philosophical lens? Almost?
I would call it a philosophy, yes. There's a great Hoppe book called Economic Science and the Austrian Method, where he points out that what Mises actually did by like describing this framework around action is the bridge between subjective valuations and objective goods and services in reality. So it's the bridge between our brains and between the objective and the subjective. Praxeology is to the subjective what mathematics is to the objective.
It's always nice when you find something which...
Ben, what are your passions outside Bitcoin?
I mean, it's pretty all-consuming, I'll be honest. I mean, Nostr's great. I like Nostr. Family, I still... When I was a teacher, I taught carpentry. That was my subject, and I still build a lot of stuff. I built my own house, and I try and... I think it's important to do something physical to kind of ground you, particularly when you're on the computer all day. I don't think it's particularly good for you. So outside of Bitcoin, I try and do that. Try and, work with my hands, family, good food, enjoy food. And and then outside of Bitcoin on the technical side, Nostr. I have really high hopes for Nostr as something. So when it comes to Nostr, is when you look at a lot of the problems in the world, I feel humanity is being pushed towards the edge of a cliff. Because of algorithms to try and capture users, because of because it's profitable for certain corporations running these social media platforms. And if that's taken away, in that the user controls their algorithm or the client, and they have that freedom of movement where they can move to different clients, that there's some profoundly important work to be done there, which I think we underestimate. Like, we underestimate the potential for some of these platforms. Because, I mean, you create division in people. You push them towards populist leaders. Those populist leaders fall out with each other and they stop throwing bombs at each other. Whereas in something like Nostr, it feels very open and you don't feel like you're being swayed in one direction or another. And I think it has the potential to do a lot of good in the world and then hopefully stop, a nuclear war.
This episode is brought to you by Bitbox, the Swiss-built Bitcoin hardware wallet that guards your sovereignty. I use Bitbox because it's fully open source, easy to use, and I can plug it into my phone. If you need a hardware wallet to keep your Bitcoin off exchanges, offline and safe, go to bitbox.swiss/allinbitcoin for 5% off, or use the code allinbitcoin, or check the show notes.
My way of describing Nostr is that it's the internet's most beautiful clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Because it's
totally.
kind of clunky at the moment.
It should be chaos. Yeah, it's nice. It's but I mean, it's the kind of free open source thing, isn't it? Of a sausage made in public. It's messy and dirty and horrible, but the sausage tastes nice at the end.
Yeah.
Knut, what would you say to your 20-year-old self if you had 10 minutes along with him?
My 20-year-old self. Don't think you have to ask for permission. Like, just do things. I think that's it.
Who is the smartest Bitcoiner no one is talking about?
I would say Conrad Graf.
Okay.
Who's written a book called Are Satoshis Ownable? Or Are Bitcoins Ownable? I think the title is Are Bitcoins Ownable? And he's done some fantastic presentations at the Mises Institute, I think in Australia. I think he lives in Australia, not entirely sure. But he has some fantastic points, and he's severely underappreciated in the community, I think. So Conrad Graf is my pick.
Good. You, Ben?
I mean, we're all kind of resting on the shoulders of giants in Bitcoin. And I think the thing I've seen during my time at Bitcoin, which is very sad, is when we bleed talent, because they're not appreciated at the time or supported. And I've seen a number of people leave the space because they, just didn't have the support there. And probably the one who I'd want to see come back would be Stefan Sneakerev. So he made the Mbit library, which we use, and the Bitcoin library, which we use. He made Spectre, and a lot of the free and open source hardware wallets are based on his libraries. And the guy was just a legit genius. Like he left Bitcoin to go and build quantum computers. He's like he's the sort of person we want in Bitcoin. And he was just so friendly, so nice. He was one of the people who helped encourage that maker community in Bitcoin earlier on. And I remember I was making the offline point of sale. And the way it works is a secret. It creates a hash and then it puts it in the thing. And then when you scan it, it then sends it to the server and proves that it's like from the POS. And then it sends back a PIN to reveal that the payment was made as a receipt for the payment. And I needed some cryptography done, and he was on a tube at the time, and in about 5 minutes he just fired off this script. And then I sent it to Fearjaff, and I was like, oh, Stefan's made this thing for us to use in the POS. And then Fearjaff was like, this isn't doing any cryptography. It's not doing anything. And then about half an hour later, he came back to me and was like, oh my God, he wrote a unique cryptographic script for what you wanted. And I was like, yeah, and this guy fired it off while on the train, just going to work on his phone. That's the sort of talent you want in Bitcoin.
And why did he leave?
Yeah, I just he was burning out. The burnout. And I think a lot of people have it, they get very excited about Bitcoin and then their personal lives suffer because they're working so hard. He was working for Spectre, the company at the time. Moritz, who's a good guy too, he was trying to build a company around that. And they should have had investment because they were both incredibly legitimate people. At the time, I suppose things like OpenStats didn't exist. But they should have had more investment, and they should have had they should have had some grants or something to keep them around. I mean, they did sell Spectre, I think, to Sparrow eventually, but by then Stefan was gone. But yeah, it was a real shame. It was a real shame. He would be, the Bitcoin who everyone forgets, but there's a bunch of them.
Another one I have to mention is John Attack. because John Attack helped me edit my first book, Bitcoin Sovereignty Through Mathematics. And up until the very last chapter, like half of the last chapter. And then he went to a meeting in New York, and this is in 2019. And he said, after the meeting, he said, I'm sorry, but I don't want my name attached to this book. It's a bit too politically incorrect. I'm afraid I won't get the grants I'm trying to get here. And that was after that meeting. And this is where the whole wokeness corruption thingy started in Bitcoin Core. So he came on the pod a couple of months back and told the whole story and what has happened. And there's been some controversy there. My friend Hodlonaut has written a bunch of articles about it, all taken from public sources. And so he was sort of a whistleblower there, but he's been great over the years and he's contributed a lot to Bitcoin. And this, for me, he's my personal unsung hero because he helped me out with the book so much. So yeah, I finally got to meet him in El Salvador back in November, and that was like so sweet. Instant bromance.
Yeah, it's funny when you meet someone in the meet space and then they say who they are, and it takes you a second to make the connection. And when you do, you're like,
No, I actually met him in January also, but we got to hang out a bit more in November.
What's the biggest influence on your decision-making process?
Just making stuff useful. Like I want everything I make to be as useful as possible to as many people as possible. And saving someone some time by building something which they can use for something. It's like probably the primary driver, I would say.
It's a super hard question because there's so much. I mean, I'm very interested in the creative process, and I'm also interested in how different creative work is from productive work. They're sort of polar opposites, because to be creative and create something new or something beautiful, you sort of have to not work. You have to like let your mind play around and not have a worry in the world and just go on long walks, which can be super hard to do in today's world with all the notifications and stuff going on, and you have to send an email and you have to do this and that. So, which is part of why I like conversation, because in conversation you have to improvise. I like improvising, and then again, I can enjoy productive work also. I can enjoy just hyper focusing and doing a task over and over again. But just figuring out these differences between these things, and also when I left my Fiat job, I figured out other things about myself. For instance, that I get nothing done after lunch. Like my productive hours are like in the morning from 6 to 8 or something. So I work like 2 hours quite hard every single day of the year, and then I try to relax the rest of the day, like to the extent which I can. But I figure I'm much more. The output is much higher if I like listen to these things that my body is telling me to listen to. So there's a lot of like self-reflection and learning about yourself when you're doing creative work.
I completely agree with that one. And actually that would probably be my answer for what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Yeah.
Is that your brain works a hell of a lot better before noon, because I'm exactly the same.
Did it in your 20s though?
No, no. It's in the, or maybe not. I don't know.
Because when I woke up early in my 20s, I was a total idiot. I was just disoriented and bumped into things.
No, you're right. That's true. No, but now I'm completely with you. Like an hour spent first thing in the morning, even before breakfast, is worth 4 or 5 hours, in the late afternoon.
John Cleese said one thing about creativity that I figured out while writing the Python sketches and Faulty Towers and stuff, and that is not only do you have to not be interrupted, but you have to know that you're not going to get interrupted. And I think the key is when you get a family, you know that the only hours that you know that you're not going to get interrupted is before everyone else wakes up.
Yeah.
And like I live in Spain now, so I make a little espresso and I walk out in the sunlight and I have my slippers on and I stroll out to my office, which has a soundproof wall, so I can like do whatever I want there. And it's a great I've found a good formula.
That's good. Yeah. I'm still finding it, but I think
it's a work in progress always, but yeah.
How do you stay true to yourself when others have different expectations?
Be honest. Like, be honest to yourself and others. Like, be honest to yourself. Like, I think that's very important.
That's how you do it?
Few people, I think many people do things without second or, more importantly, third thoughts. if you're honest to yourself, like, then everything becomes easier. If you can wake up every day and just be yourself, then your true self, then life is easy. So I think.
And what if other people around you have different expectations? That's the thing.
That's the thing about Bitcoin. At some point, it gives you the ability to just say, "Fuck you! I don't care. I won't do what you tell me," and then you can live that.
It's a Rage Against the Machine song.
Yeah, exactly.
Mine would just be I'll lower the expectations of everyone around me.
Yeah. These are good questions. Like,
They're hard.
You have to think about. Yeah, they're hard, but they're good.
Guys, I've got a quick favor to ask. If you are listening right now, take a second and hit subscribe and the bell if you are on YouTube, or follow on your podcast app so you don't miss the episodes and guests that matter to you. If we've ever given you value, this is the moment to give it back. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps keep improving every single episode. And to everyone already following, thank you. You are the reason we've been able to raise the bar. Your support, whether it's a donation, a comment, or subscribing, helps these conversations reach further. It also gives us the push to keep going, keep traveling, keep preparing, and keep bringing you in-person conversations like this. Thank you. Join me at BTC Hell 2026, the Nordic Bitcoin conference in Helsinki this September 25th, 26th. Use code ALLINBITCOIN for 10% off your ticket. See you there. So if you could only pass one piece of wisdom to the next generation, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's everybody's that Socratic thing of killing the ego and knowing that you know nothing, because then you seek out information and knowledge and you want to grow.
I want to quote my granddad, whom I never met on my father's side. He had an expression that was passed down the generation, so to speak, that's just etched itself into my head, and that is that which you can do without you own. Meaning that if you rid yourself of material cravings, you actually own. Like, if I don't need a Lambo, I know I own all the Lambos in the world because I own the urge to own a Lambo. Like, it does not decide over me. So ridding yourself of as much cravings as many cravings as possible is probably a very good advice. So that's that which you can do without your own is my answer.
I'm quite like there is like a kind of like anti-consumer vibe with kids these days, where they want to buy the retro. You know, there's a lot of retro clothing, and there's sort of fast fashion things, and they're still doing incredibly well. But I do see kids almost like I don't know, taking those things, those consumer things, which I don't know, maybe a previous generation would hold to. They're a little bit more humble.
I mean, Bitcoin is perfectly aligned with this because it ends consumerism in a way. It incentivizes quality over quantity always.
Do you think there's a problem with we live in a post-Keynesian or a Keynesian society?
Yeah.
So and since the economics of Keynes is when a lot of the technology is developed. We have the internet, we have computers.
Incentives are skewed everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But do you think we would have that stuff? I mean, I don't want to pin. I think there's a humans invent things.
Yeah.
But then would the cheap capital be there to invest and build those things if there wasn't cheap money flowing around?
Okay, so to produce to tackle this from first principles, or to not tackle it from first principles, but to give an example of so in the world of computers and computer hardware, for the last 50 years, prices have dropped. The cost of a computer has dropped in terms of fiat, even in terms of fiat for the last 50 years. And they're still getting cheaper and people still buy them, like en masse. So deflation does not destroy the economy. This is the greatest myth ever told. It's the greatest lie ever told. And when you look at why so many subscribe to this lie, it's quite easy. If the closer you are to the money printer, the more you have to gain from people believing this lie. So of course governments and central banks and stuff love the ideas of Keynes because it enriches them at the expense of everyone else.
It's kind of impossible to know though because we that's what we live in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So we live in the timeline we live in, and we cannot know like
what it would be if it weren't for like increasing aggregate demands.
There's a great essay by Frederick Bastiat called what's seen and what's not seen, and where the broken window fallacy is in that thing, I think.
Yes.
So the cost of what you don't see, you don't see what could have happened. You don't see how much better private roads could have been instead of state planned roads. But you can deductively reason yourself to that more ends will be met for more people the freer the market is. Like a free market is an engine for more ends being met. We use means to reach ends, and more ends will be met if you have a sound money standard and a freer market. Like, it's kind of impossible to argue against that. And I could sit here for 2 hours and try to remember why, but this is one of the things you can deductively reason yourself to, and I truly believe that. And deflation is key to an abundant future. If all prices denominated in Bitcoin, all prices drop forever. If Bitcoin just continues working. And that is the greatest. That's good for all people, especially poor people. Like even if you don't have any Bitcoin, the cost of manufacturing and shipping and everything else goes down the more Bitcoin economy there is around, the more Bitcoin free market stuff there is around, the more accessible everything else becomes. And
does it not become kind of more expensive in a way because you have you can't use public infrastructure to drive your products around, or you have to pay for the actual waste of products in your factory which you're chucking out? And so there's an argument in the other direction that actually the true cost of products is buffered and lower. It's
hidden.
Probably hidden. You don't know what the cost is.
It's hidden because it's extremely wasteful the way it is when theft is baked into everything. Like what inflation is like baked in theft in every single transaction made in a fiat currency. Every time you use a $20 bill, you're stealing from your children. Because that $20 bill came into being because someone decided to go into debt. And there's never enough money to pay back the interest. So what you need is more and more debt. And that's why prices go up forever in fiat terms. See, every currency is hyperinflating. It's just the pace of the decline differs from country to country. But all fiat currencies have to die because the interest that cannot be paid back compounds, and it becomes an exponential curve, and then everything's catastrophic. And Bitcoin is the remedy to exactly that.
But I don't know whether it's a thought experiment I've always thought with, say if we had a Bitcoin standard, and I am kind of playing devil's advocate here because I'm not sure which way I sit on it. So Keynesian's philosophy was that markets were inherently volatile, and you have periods of overproduction. And then you have market crash, and then that causes a lot of businesses, perfectly good businesses, to go out of business. So then Keynes would be like, well, you take the fair weather, the surplus you create during the boom times, and then you buffer out the dips. Now, I would understand that the Austrian school would say we have to let things collapse, and then you end up with better markets. No,
we would say that the boom and bust cycles
would go away.
Are a product of the money printing.
I'm not sure that's like proven though, because we live in a post-Keynesian world. I mean,
like I said, you can't prove anything in economics empirically, but you can deductively reason yourself to one position or another. And there's a great Mises essay about the Great Depression and why it was actually created by the state and not solved by the state.
But my fear in a Bitcoin standard would be that there would be a market crash, a Great Depression of some sort, for whatever reason, and then it wouldn't be the government imposing fiat currency. It would be the people saying, I want my kids to starve, print some money. And that would be the thing which causes them to print more money, even if the government didn't intervene. Like again, completely theoretical, but that would be my worry of how, long lasting a Bitcoin, because different countries, they have different wants and needs at different times. So if you look at the 2008 crisis as an example, Iceland were able to dig themselves out of it because they weren't part of the European Union, and they could just print currency. Whereas the Greeks, they were part of the European Union, and the Germans and the French wouldn't bail them out. And they were in very similar economic positions, but one having control. This is what the modern monetary theorists would say, that one, because different countries have different wants and needs at different times, that one was able to dig themselves out of the crisis, whereas the other one wasn't. And again, playing devil's advocate, it's just...
What I would answer to that is that all of these quote-unquote solutions are actually just like they're the equivalent of putting a band-aid on a cancer tumor, because you don't fix the cancer of
But it's whether people would let the cancer be fixed. They let the chemo go through.
But the people are retarded. That meme comes to mind. And yes, in very many cases, the people have screamed for more money printing. I mean, everyone thinks there's a free lunch, and it's not until you realize that doesn't exist that you get a proper view of what's going on, I think.
But I suppose
what are your thoughts on Nostr.com and Nostr.org?
Oh God, don't ask me that question. So Knut, you know I'm the worst thing in Nostr, because there's this industry with millions spent, resources burnt, building out all this infrastructure, these great tools, clients, wonderful, right? You Google Nostr, you end up on my website, Nostr.com. Yeah. So
I didn't know that.
You have the entire of Brazil being kicked off X, looking for an alternative, Googling Nostr. So we get 1-2 million unique hits a week on Nostr.com.
You must be very happy that you bought that domain name.
Well, I mean, the story behind this domain, by the way, I'm not a domain troll. It was months of me saying, dude, someone needs to grab this domain. It was expensive at the time. It was $4,000. And there was 20 of us in a Telegram group. So I was like, it's a random domain name. I said, someone needs to buy this domain. And it was a couple of months of me saying that. And then eventually I was like, I'm just going to buy it. And it was horrible, but I bought it. I'm glad I did. But I'm the problem. So you have all this wonderful stuff happening over here. And then you have someone Googling Nostr. And then you have my technical website, which puts people off. So someone comes along and looks at Nostr, and it's just me going, and they go away.
So you're basically the Roger Ver of Nostr.
Yeah. Do you know the worst part about that is when I built the first Nostr Twitter client, but I'm not a very good developer, so I had to get Feardraft to proof it for me and improve it. So I paid him. So I was also the first person to invest in Nostr too. So that's Roger Ver's line. I was the first person to invest in Bitcoin. Yeah. I've got Bitcoin.com.
There's a lot of Roger parallels here.
Yeah, it sucks. But no, it's something which needs to be publicly said, because there needs to be a hell of a lot more pressure on me. So like, I mean, in Allen Bits, we're incredibly underfunded. We always have been. So we have a limited amount of resources, and having Nostr.com is always something we just kind of is a side note, but we need to make it like economically productive because it's part of the company. And it would be with all those hits, but it's just this. So we are making more of an effort. We are going to make more of an effort to make it better. For the beginning part, we didn't want to be seen to like capture users because there's always great clients being built. So we didn't want to put a client on there because then people would go there, think that was Nostr, and that would be wrong. But I feel now if we have a very dull, like simple client, which really does funnel people towards the wider ecosystem, that's probably the answer. Yeah, like it's a problem. Like, no one knows. Like everyone's like, oh, the amount of Nostr users doesn't go up, but there's 2 million people a week, unique visitors coming to the website.
Okay, so I have a question about Nostr, and that is like almost all as I understand it, almost all development on Nostr is still funded by grants. So developers get a bunch of money to do basically whatever the fuck they want. Yeah. Instead of responding to actual market demand, we would like this. And that I think that's the biggest reason it's still a clusterfuck because you get bored with developing something and then, no, I'm not going to do this, business card reader here. I'm going to develop Telegram on Nostr or like something else. I mean,
I agree completely. So that with all grants, I've always been quite skeptical of them. Mm-hmm. With OpenStats, because they had a kind of board. I thought, okay, maybe it's the lesser of the evils. We did get an OpenStats grant for a while. More recently, we haven't had, and then it's hard to then talk shit about it because they're giving you money, aren't they? So you bought. But they didn't renew our grant, and it's very much a black box when you apply for a grant. They don't give you a reason why. But by a friend of a friend of a friend, I know the reason why they didn't give us a grant. And actually, there's a bunch of misunderstandings. Like one of them is, I said that we have 100 to 200k users using Allen Bits, as in they're running Allen Bits or they're using somebody else's Allen Bits install. They thought we meant they're using our demo server, where we charge a 5% transaction fee. We kill it every couple of weeks or whatever. We charge a 5% transaction fee so people don't use it. So they thought, well, they've got a couple of 100,000 users and they got charged a 5% transaction fee. Why should we give them money? But because OpenStats is a black box, there's no appeal process. You can't amend. So you find out this stuff and you're just like, oh my God. And then there's some clear examples of nepotism with SeedSigner. Like SeedSigner is built by great people. There's some controversy over using, and I've always been quite openly outspoken about how using a Pi, which is essentially a bad computer for a hardware wallet, could be improved by using like a microcontroller instead. But they're good people, and they produce something where lots of people use Seed Signer. They've applied for a bunch of OpenSats grants, but they get blocked, and they get blocked because NVK's in the board, and so is Odell, who's sponsored by NVK. So I don't want to talk too much shit and gossip too much.
No, but these dynamics are so interesting, because I would gladly promote Seed Signer on the Bitcoin Infinity show, but Bitbox gives me money, and not very much, but still, yeah. I like the Bitbox too.
Yeah, it's good.
But I'd rather like at some point you have to pick and choose, and it's
important that free and open, like you have to have like that real free and open source DIY project, and they're good. Like the Keith and Seed, the people who work on this thing are good. And I say, because the
problem is, how do you monetize? Right?
Well, they do sell them. I emailed OpenSats and I said, your role is to identify popular projects in Bitcoin that would use funds to improve. And have proved, they've done proof of work, they've proved that they've worked hard on their projects, give them some money.
So you're a central planner, basically.
No. I'm saying it exists and there's nothing you can do about it existing, right? So I'm saying give them money. However, they think their job, which I think is worse, is that they have an agenda and then they start to fund projects for the direction in which they want Bitcoin to go. And that is really fishy.
That is super, super scary. To me, that's like the most dangerous thing.
Yeah.
When you have that.
It's like the Bitcoin Foundation or something. It's like it's something we've fought against for a long time.
Yeah. And it's tricky. It's very tricky.
And I've spoken to lots of projects, and I agree. Like it's like, and actually there was part of me where I was like, it's kind of nice when the OpenSats grant went away, because we do have to really concentrate on the for-profit arm of LMBits, and we haven't got that buffer. But for us, for like a resilient ecosystem, which can actually work out there, which can't be controlled, and controlled, we can't be just reliant upon Jack Dorsey giving money to OpenSats, because he might just go away one day. We'll figure it out. But
to me, it reminds me, I spent a couple of years of my childhood in Mozambique and Tanzania, so in Africa, and because my dad worked on different projects there, and a lot of the other Scandinavians that worked on SIDA projects. So we saw firsthand like what foreign aid does. Like and back in the 80s, it was like, oh, you get this much money. They made a building half done, and then they closed the money spigot. And instead of like continuing projects after the money was not there anymore, people just stopped working on them and started waiting for the next handout. And I think there's always it's reminiscent to that with this grants economy, like that instead of doing what's actually needed in the market, you're doing like fuck all. So.
And it's a hard one, because it's a very generous thing for Jack to give all that money to the ecosystem, and he's trying to do good with it. And it's not to sound ungrateful either, but I do think that, so the reason I thought OpenSats were like, I still think that OpenSats is the lesser of the evils, and there's less agenda there than other grant systems, is they do have a board, but they got to have more openness when it comes to how decisions are made. It can't be this black, it's like Caesar's thumb. And I've spoken to a bunch of projects who've been denied funding. It's really demoralizing, particularly if you're not given a reason. You just think, I'm not good enough. The thing actually, I don't have weekends. I work on this thing at the expense of my family. I don't have holidays. I'm working through the night. That thing isn't good enough. It's not compelling enough. And it's a pretty miserable thing to have someone say to you. So if they give you a good reason, it's like, okay, fair enough. Maybe we can adjust and change it. But for it just to be the Caesar's thumb, that's not right. That needs to change. So it exists, and it will continue to exist, but they need to make it more transparent.
Yeah. We should aim for non-loss organizations instead of non-profits.
Yeah. I always thought you should make like a separate thing for, like a crowdsource grant for rejects from OpenSats, people who've been denied OpenSats grants, just for them. There'd be like there's some great projects that like Standard Sats, there's Seed Signer, there's a whole bunch of great projects out there, but they didn't get funding. And they're just not kind of in the fad, the click, the sexy thing, whatever. What is what it is.
Knut, is the hand really invisible?
Depends on who you're asking and at what time of day. But no, I'd say, don't bite the invisible hand that feeds you is the first sentence in my praxeology book. So yes, the invisible hand, I think it's it's been very misinterpreted, because what it basically means is if I have something of value and I give it to you, and you have something of value, something that I value, and you give it to me, where both of us are better off. Like, so that's the very basis of the free market, is that no transactions happen unless both parties believe that they have something to gain from the transaction, meaning that it's better for everyone. Free market interactions are better for everyone. And if you introduce a gun in the equation, I mean, it's easier to get what you want with a kind word and a gun than without the gun. But then it's not consensual anymore, and only the person with the gun perceives that he has something to gain from the interaction. The other party, I mean, voluntarily gives up whatever the attacker is taking, because he values his life more than his stuff. But it's not a powerful mechanism for civilizational progress. The civilization is free market interactions. Like the civilized way to do things, by the very definition of the word, the civilized way to do things is with consent. We agree to do something instead of forcing one another to do something. The other is barbarism, and the state always, anything the state does has a measure of barbarism baked into it. If there's taxes, if there's inflation, there's always, the incentives are not as good as they could have been. The resources are misallocated and fewer ends are met because it's not optimized.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when you say barbarism there, that Rosa Luxemburg, she was a socialist who was part of the socialist movement in Germany, and her famous quote was "Socialism or barbarism." And she was eventually killed by, she was an anti-statist socialist, and she was killed by what then, but they obviously became the National Socialists, and then that didn't really work out. But
yeah, you have another view of the word socialism than I do.
Well, this is the thing we were talking about on the way here, was that words evolve and their meaning over time. And I would say that I agree that the invisible hand means that now, but Adam Smith's original interpretation, when he talked about this invisible hand, it was the British industrialists, which is not the meaning it has now, but at the time when he coined it, it meant that the British industrialists, they had an interest in improving the lives of the people who lived around them, even for their own, and this is the example he gave, for their own selfish needs, because it would improve their own security, because it was capital in context. They had the mill in the town where they lived, and there was this thing which would guide decisions to improve the lives of people around them. In Wealth of Nations, that's how it's only mentioned.
Okay, I haven't read Wealth of Nations, embarrassingly
it's interesting
enough.
It changed over time.
But I was always taught that the thing he figured out was just this, there's mutual benefit in a voluntary transaction, like in a consensual.
No, it's less generalized than that. It's more specific. And it's specific for that form of capital, which was kind of there were examples of like corporatism, but there were few and far between. Most capital was deployed locally, and you had a vested interest in improving the lives of the people around you, even for selfish needs, which is how Adam Smith talked about invisible hand, which I find personally more compelling, because I find it easier to rationalize, I guess.
I mean, you could argue that everything anyone ever does is for selfish needs, from the point of view that even if I'm being altruistic, I'm being it for... from the praxeological perspective, I feel a little uneasy. I imagine a state of the future where I've done something, used some means to reach a certain end, and then I choose what means to use, and then I try to reach that end in the expectation of finding myself in a position of a little less uneasiness. And I think this framework is fantastic because it explains anything. Like, it explains why people value things differently. For instance, like one breath of air could be worth an infinite amount of money to a free diver trapped under ice, but one breath of air is not worth anything to a suicidal person. So all these value judgments are entirely subjective, and I think that the invisible hand is just, the way I interpret it is just describing the phenomenon that if we help each other reach each other's end, like if I help you reach your end and you help me reach mine, that's good for everyone.
Because there was the kind of rational behavior, survival of the fittest, that sort of stuff, came out of the Darwinism movement. And then Kropotkin, the anarchist Kropotkin, he wrote a book which was Mutual Aid: A Factor of Evolution, which is how mutualism and how Darwin himself, it wasn't about survival of the fittest. You've got to outcompete everyone else. You can work together. You have herds, you have swarms, you have all these things in nature of animals working together. And arguably when humans did work together and started, like creating grain houses, and they would have like surplus time, which they could spend on developing all the things we take for granted now. So that, mutual aid is, that's something we agree with on the left, that some behavior is not, it may be beneficial to you, but working together is beneficial.
I from what I hear from lefties, maybe I'm biased because I don't talk to them very much, but it's often that there's admittance that yes, people can be altruistic, and that's sort of what the invisible hand means. Sort of you're alluding to here, that people will voluntarily give away, but that's not the point. Like the point is that you can be totally egotistical and still be good for your fellow
like
man.
Adam Smith said, that's for their own security, for the British industrialists' own security, they would improve the lives of those around them. So there's still an interest to work together.
By just trading with them, if you're Gordon Gekko and you want to make as much money as possible, on a sound money standard, even Gordon Gekko would be good for other people, because it's just voluntary. Like for a trade to happen, we need to both perceive that we have something to gain from the trade.
What's power?
I would say, for me, Hegel,
energy.
You know how praxeology for you is, it helps kind of explain a lot of the world. For me, there's a few kind of philosophical concepts which stick with you and then explain a lot of behavior and patterns you see with humans. And one of them would be the master-slave dialectic by Hegel, which is this thought experiment of how a power dynamic begins, so you imagine there's just emptiness, and then there's consciousness, and then it's wandering around doing nothing in emptiness, and then it bumps into another consciousness, and then it's like, oh, you're one of those things like me, I'm also consciousness, and they have a little chat, and then one of them inevitably starts to try and suppress the other and wants to become the master and dominate the other, and you have this power relationship.
Why is that inevitable?
Because you can get them to do stuff for you. Because you can get them to work for you. You can get them to
but you can also realize that you would both be better off if
totally. Yeah, totally. But that's the dialectic. So that would be the process of reaching, peership stuff. Yeah, totally. I agree. But thinking through that rationally, like as thesis, antithesis, synthesis, so one tries to dominate the other. And then the material world, which that wants, so it's getting him to build all the things and make the world, our material world. You start to resent them as the master, because actually the person you're controlling is the thing building your world. And also you resent them because they're a mirror. You're treating them, you don't have empathy. You're treating them, when you're enslaving somebody else, you're enslaving yourself.
Yeah.
Because you resent them for showing you that part of yourself which you don't want to see.
Yeah, you're limiting your own options as to what you could have done with this person, and that would have been more productive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But then you've got to continue the thing, right? And then I mean, this is where Hegel would say that the slave then starts to realize, well, hold on, I'm building everything here. This is I have some power over you. I can, and then there's this sort of power dynamic which starts to begin. But it extends to a bunch of stuff. So like in Wales, the English would call us sheep shaggers, and the Welsh were always kind of like the butt of the joke. They're always have the Englishman, Welshman, blah blah. It's always the silly one, the silly Welsh person. But that's because the English, for a long period of time, the Welsh were subservient to them. And rather than have empathy for them, one of the best ways to lose empathy for someone is to belittle them. And you see this in the US and the way they joke about the Mexicans and they're lazy, even though they're doing all the work for them. You saw it with the Italians before when the Italians first started to emigrate to America. There was the Marx Brothers, that was the daft Italian. And then in Hollywood, you had the gangster Italian, which kind of like cleared that up and made Italians cool again. And the Irish too. The Irish were often the workers, so they were often joked about too. So it's really interesting, like the power dynamic between different humans. And then, like Hegel said, eventually, Hegel thought it was state institutions which would make this thing happen, but I don't agree there. But eventually, the answer is peership, that they would kind of work together and treat each other as equals.
And your definition of power?
My definition of, like, as in political power, I guess physical power. I'd say this is where praxeology differs between catalactic and biological competition. So catalactic competition is free market. Whoever provides the cheapest goods and services wins, and everyone's better off. Biological is fang and claw, and one person dominating the other. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about master-slave dynamic. So in political power is, I'd say, it's whatever power you have to coerce other people, like, which is not only the actual amount of guns you have or how dangerous the guns are, but it's more about how how many guns and how people perceive your power. Power is, I mean, I pay my taxes, maybe not me, but anyway, if a person pays taxes, they do that for a reason, and whether that reason is because they believe in the system or that they are afraid to be thrown in, that men with guns will come and take them away, that's impossible to know. However, if everyone just stopped paying taxes, it would be too expensive for the state in most cases to send men with guns to all of them to pick up the resources. So in that sense, perceived power is more how much power we perceive our prison masters have is more potent than actual physical power.
Who or what has power today?
State, I suppose, and this is the ultimate power broker. I mean, because you have corporation, state, both. State capitalism. I mean, it's funny because you have like what you have. I mean, we would, again, words and definitions and what you're defending, but our capitalism, true capitalism, is something we've seen very little of, and the crony capitalism we see in the US could probably be defined as kind of a state capitalism, where they're together. And then similarly in China, which came from the other direction, is kind of a state capitalism. So it's funny how they both kind of end up with this state capitalism blob.
What's more powerful today? Would you say governments, corporations, or networks?
Free markets are by their very nature more powerful than any army could ever be. The reason we have civilization at all is because of the free market. And that force, I am an optimist. I think that force for good is going to be stronger than any coercive force could ever be, because all the coercive things lead to totalitarianism, and that doesn't work, so it collapses in on itself. The free market always wins in the end, so that's why I'm choosing to be a hopeful optimist. I don't think there's a way to stop people from being good to one another. I believe in the goodness of man.
Is narrative a form of power?
No.
No?
I guess, I mean, like, Trump's doing all right, isn't he?
Yeah.
And who controls the narrative today?
Well, I mean, this is algorithm stuff, isn't it? So this is the state capitalism. Well, you want state capitalism because you can control everything. You can control the free press. You can control everything, and you can spin your narrative, and then just accumulate more power. And if you're in bed with and then you give those corporations, or whatever you want to call them, because I'm not even sure you should call them corporations. You give them the sort of access and tax breaks, whatever else, which other participants in the market, the free market, don't have. This is always something which I struggle with as well. Just as the people would in a free market, if there was a bus cycle, they might want to turn on the money printer. I don't
think so, because it's at that point that's where it's not a free market anymore.
No. But the other thing which I find similar is, like, and I'm not sure if it would happen or not, is if you get rid of state completely, which I want, I'd get rid of state completely. It's very beneficial to capital to have state and regulation.
Yeah.
So would big capital club together and then start trying to create a state again?
Yeah. So I think the whole premise is wrong. I think so. The way I would frame it is, if you ending the state completely would mean that no one had the monopoly on violence in any given area of the earth. So it would basically be no aggression whatsoever. And I think that's utopian.
Star Trek utopia.
So like, even within families, one person will dominate the other at certain points in time. Like, it's a utopia, but the important takeaway is that we can always fight for a smaller state, and regardless of how small it is, it can always be smaller, and that's always the right choice, because what it actually means is less coercion, less aggression.
Is power something we take or something others give us?
Both.
Yeah, I guess it's both. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's both.
Absolutely both. I mean, so the simplest example, I waited for you to ask the question, and thereby you gave me the power to speak now. And you are both not speaking now, meaning that I sort of have a power at the moment. I could have just raised my voice and maybe intimidated you to not speak, and then I would have taken power by force. So, like, these definitions are so... I mean, it becomes muddled at some point. Like, where do you draw the line? But I think it helps to see every human interaction as trade, like that. Everything is... we do it because we think it's mutually beneficial. I do it because I think it's beneficial to me, and you do it because you think it's beneficial to you. Even conversation.
I feel like it's like a pretty negative outlook on humans. If
Negative, it's very positive.
But if someone falls over and I rush over to help them, it's not for my own sake. It's because
No. But you do it because you feel compelled to, because you're a good person. So when we say in praxeology that it's a rational choice, it has nothing to do with your motivations. Like, I cannot know why you did that. Probably because you felt empathy and compassion for the person falling over, and that's a super good thing. It doesn't reduce people to just profit, greedy machines,
yeah.
like, or because it doesn't separate like the money from this equation, but calls everything like profit. In the truest sense, is any psychological profit. It's not just dollars and cents.
I guess it's the baggage which comes along with a word like trade or whatever, and the negative connotations of some things. And it's a bit like money, like the negative connotation. And money is the root of all evil.
But all of that is because
of the mechanism.
We've been attacked with propaganda all our lives. Yeah.
What's something about power you had to learn the hard way?
Oh, it's that first time when you have an asshole boss who treats you badly, and you just have to say yes sir, no sir. I always think this is the productive power of someone working this is why I like the Robert Owen example. He's a Welsh. Did you see that we talked about that earlier today? A Welsh mill owner who bought New Lanark in Scotland, and it's a failing mill, and he made it incredibly profitable. And this is actually Adam Smith's invisible hand in action. And the way he did it was to treat the workers with respect, not shout at them, make them feel confident, help them, to read and write, offer them good food, to build the world's first primary school so the kids would have somewhere to go, so they weren't just running around the mill. Yeah, and it was incredibly profitable. I mean, it's funny because on the socialists, the lefties, they'll hold him up as this great socialist, but actually he's a really good capitalist.
Yeah.
Because he was taking care of his workers, and it made them more productive. So it's that feeling when you are being talked down to by the asshole boss. It makes you fuck up more. You feel like Fawlty Towers, like Manuel. You feel like Manuel. Like if Basil Fawlty treated him a little bit better, he'd probably be all right. But the fact he's always on his back, and everyone's been there, and it's the worst feeling in the world because you feel stripped of your autonomy.
Yeah. And then again, a boss can't be too kind either, because then you become lazy and you don't do anything. In certain contexts, at least.
I don't know.
Who gets to decide what treating the worker well actually means, other than the worker and the employee themselves? Like, why should anyone...
Well, I suppose the Austrian school would say it would be the worker's ability to move to a different job.
Or a different jurisdiction or whatever.
Yeah.
It's always in the eye of the beholder. Like, we value things subjectively, including if we're treated well or not. And so it's always up to the employer and the worker, and they have to, on the free market, they will have to come to an agreement and then uphold the contract.
I guess where it's similar to that coercion which you feel by state, that you work for this person and they have a certain ownership, they have an ownership over your wage, of your labor, for example. And there is a fear. I mean, most men's fear, men's fears is generally it's losing their job and going bald. They're their two main fears. And it is something which kind of keeps...
Not their wives? What?
Maybe that's number three. Well, I think you lose your job and go bald, your wife leaves.
You lose all three.
But so there is a power dynamic by the person who's employing you to work somewhere, which maybe it's healthy, maybe it's not. But if they treat you in such a way which you wouldn't expect someone to treat you like that in the street, or a friend or someone, a regular neighbor or something, you would kick back, but you can't because they're employing you and you have to just say yes sir, no sir. Then there is a power dynamic there.
Yeah. What about you, Knut? What's something about power you had to learn the hard way?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is Max Hillebrand's new book, The Praxeology of Privacy, which I helped him out a bit with it and read it before others did. So it's a super good book, and it sort of marries the ideas of the original cypherpunks with the Austrian economists. And most people don't realize that that book, yes, there it is, beautiful.
Everyone should go and buy this, by the way. So Max Hillebrand, he's a great thinker in the space.
Of course, after you buy all of my books. But anyway, it's the thesis is that whether you're private or not is there we go.
All the books
is baked into
like QVC.
How private a thing is baked into the very first axiom of human action. I mean, you value things subjectively in your own brain. That why you did something is always private. So private, and if you know you're being surveyed, if you know that men with guns might take your freedoms away if you act one way or instead of another, then the chances are high that you might choose another path. So if the state wasn't there, I probably wouldn't pay taxes voluntarily. Privacy and how that's connected to power is what comes to mind. But that's because I read this book very recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible to be in a powerful position without abusing it?
Absolutely. You just don't abuse it.
It is, but it's tempting to. If you have power of another human, it's tempting to push it as far as you can go, particularly if it meets your own needs, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's always that temptation there. It's something I'm very aware of because I'm an employee. I employ the people in Ellen Bits, and there's some phrasing I really hate by when people talk about the people they work or the people who they employ or the people they work with, and they'll like team and they refer to my team. Oh, my team is really good. And I'm like, So I always try and use words like our team and rather than my team. Because
doesn't that fall into cringe category after a while?
Not really. It really annoys me because I hear someone talking and they say my team, and I'm just like, oh Christ, you don't own them. And if you work for somebody and they say that, when I've had it, and I've just been like, oh, please don't say.
So if you own a football team, would you call that our team or my team?
I would go from our team, yeah, because it's like a group effort. But you know where I am.
Civil servants or people in uniform or politicians come to mind.
The saying is absolute power corrupts absolutely. Or power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think that's slightly wrong. I think absolute power attracts those who are already corrupted from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So people who are... the systems we live in where coercion is allowed and people don't react to it but act as sheep, in other words, democracies and other forms of where there's a big state, if you want to get to the top of the power hierarchy in those societies, you sort of have to be a psychopath. You get there by promising a lot and not delivering on anything. So it's inherently corrupt. And I don't have very much hope for that. And what I'm hopeful for is people and the internet and things like Nostr and Bitcoin, so the people can figure out that they don't have to be sheep, they can be wolves, and just hide away from all of this and not tell the states about what they do. It's so much easier to actually just elevate yourself outside of these fictitious entities we call nation states and just do whatever you want. Interesting statistic is that there are more private security guards in the world than there are public police officers.
Yeah. But then when you look at private policing in places like South Africa or something, it's pretty corrupt.
Yeah, but not
sometimes
saying-
more corrupt than public,
Well, I would say that public is by definition corrupt. They do arrest people for victimless crimes.
But then also on psychopaths, that's the thing I wanted to mention. So Adam Smith had a great quote on the vile maxim of the masters of mankind: all for ourselves, nothing for other people. And I think a psychopath, you put them in public sector, you put them in private sector, they'll abuse their position and they'll try and screw over as many people as they can to accumulate as much as they can. And it's just, they exist. Although I will say, I used to work with little psychopaths, and
I used to work with a very friendly psychopath.
I used to work with, the kids in youth offending, some of them beating other kids to death and whatever else. And I swear, up until the age of maybe 25, like some of the kids I'd worked with had done some of the darkest, most horrendous things you could possibly think of. But there was always something there, a flicker of humanity. And there is something about the label of a psychopath where I feel like it almost just treats them like it's like this separate kind of like alien species which lives upon us, within us. I think post 25, maybe their soul is gone.
I think Hollywood has done a lot of damage there, because most people view your average psychopath as your Hannibal Lecter character, so hyper intelligent and just ruthless. But it's actually, psychopathy is more common in stupid people than in smart people. There's a higher likelihood that you have empathy for other people and compassion if you have a higher IQ than if you have a lower one. So, and I think that's sort of counterintuitive, because they're always depicted as these evil geniuses in movies and stuff. Having said that, the smart psychopaths still exist, and they often end up in positions of power, which is one of the main reasons that we have that many problems in the world, I think.
Yeah, totally. However they get there.
I mean, just imagine bombing other people, like making that decision. You have to be a psychopath to just even imagine that.
Yeah, it's the nurture or nature question, isn't it? That idea of someone being born a psychopath, or I struggle with that. I think there's so much nurture involved in it. There's so many like experiences which goes into the development of that. Maybe they've got an inclination to act a certain way neurologically, but
there are very many studies that point to the opposite, which is adopted children and whether they inherit their IQs from their biological parents or their foster parents. And they correlate 100% with the biological parents, and not at all with the foster parents. And this is a quite big study over 30 years. So, I mean, it feels warm and nice that it would be nurture, but it's probably nature. Like, that's the harsh reality of, like, nature has, genes have power.
They do. There is a plasticity in the brain, though, which exists. And you can, I think a lot of because I've worked a lot of kids with all sorts of learning difficulties and things like, an autism or something like that, or ADHD. These are kids who would spend just huge chunks of their childhoods just sat in front of screens. And the way the brain is plastic, you put a brain anywhere and it'll adapt. A young brain, it will adapt for the environment in which it exists in. And you stick them in front of a screen, it's going to adapt for that environment and try to process that information. So I think that maybe, of course, genes are important.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of like nurture which goes into.
Human beings sort of want that to be true. You want to be able to be a good or bad parent when there's like, it doesn't really matter if you're, as long as you're not beating the kid up every day, it's probably fine. Like, but we sort of want to believe that we can.
I think young people,
the
young people really just need one example of a good human, a good adult, which can, in their head, they can be like, okay, that's the good adult, and it doesn't matter what other examples of adults they've had.
What has being in power cost you personally?
Oh, I'd say the thing that comes to mind first is when you start a family and you become a father, because it becomes your obligation, whether you want to believe that or not. You sort of feel it in your entire being that you are supposed to take care of these people now and provide for them. So that is a position of power, because sometimes you also have to dictate what's okay and what's not okay and stuff like that. So I guess fatherhood is a position of power where you.
And what has it cost you? What has it cost you?
Time. Cost me a lot of time, where I could decide some form of like where I could decide things without having that in mind all the time. But the cost is definitely worth it. And for me, this was true. It's not true for everyone, but I can absolutely understand workaholics more now that I'm a dad, because there's this innate urge to be productive or be with your family or be productive.
Yeah.
Like you start beating yourself up for not being one of the two. Like if you're not with your family or not working, you sort of like, why the fuck am I a slacker? And then you kick yourself in the butt. And that's not as present before you become a father, I think.
Yeah.
This is true. This is all bro science and like my personal experience, but
I agree completely. It's the thing when you first have a child. I found it easier because it's like I no longer just have to take care of myself. As long as I take care of that thing, then the world's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it becomes your purpose, whether you want it or not. And
but there is a power dynamic in relationships. If you're a male-female relationship,
absolutely.
As the male, you're just physically stronger. So if you raise your voice, there's always, even if you're not going to be violent, there's always the threat of violence that exists because you're physically bigger. Yeah. Whereas it exists less with women, which is why I always feel really aware of that now. It took me a long time to kind of figure that out because I was brought up in a very kind of shouty family, and but my partner, she really hates people raising their voices, and it took me a long time to realize it meant something different for her when I was shouting that when she would say she would just shout at me.
I have the same experience. Like it took me a long time to like figure marriage out, or it took us a long time, but it's great now. Like we have so much better mutual respect for one another and our differences, and that my way of being is valuable to her and her way of being is valuable to me, even though like during the way that was hard to see sometimes. But I think you have to work on a relationship. If you don't water it, the plant won't grow. Like you need to nurture it.
And it's so good when you have that type of relationship, when you're at that place. Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling because you feel secure. It makes you a better person,
and you
gives you a confidence.
You automatically. And I was so happy when my wife decided to stop working and just support me and the family instead and take care of because the total output of like we probably make more money with having me working all the time than us both working, especially since we moved on to Spain and stuff. But also like in most relationships I see, and certainly mine, she makes the micro decisions, and I see my being bigger and able to raise my voice if needed is sort of more like an insurance policy. So if there's a fire, I know that I'm the one who has to like, get the fuck out, and carry people away and stuff like that. I mean, it feels like you have this superpower somewhere within you. You're aware that you have it, but you try to use it as little as possible.
Fatherhood's a funny one, isn't it? Because my daughter, she asked me, she said, what's it like to be a dad? And I thought about it. I was like, wow, what a question. And I just said to her, I just spend my whole time worrying. I'm worried that the gutters are filling up. I need to fix those. And I'm worried about this. And I'm worried about the toilet blocking. And I'm worried about this and that. I'm just worried about everything all the time. All the little jobs which need to be done. Whereas I find that, I don't want to generalize too much, that I find my partner, she worries less about that. She worries about a lot of stuff, but maybe less about just maintaining the homestead, in that sort of way.
I mean, I think my worrying is not as detectable as my wife's worry. She expresses that she's worried a lot. I never tell anyone that I'm worried, but I'm much more worried than I come off as. Like of course I think about the survival of my family all the time, right? So it's a strange dynamic.
It's a strange dynamic.
Yeah.
What's the cost of looking weak?
Looking weak is not necessarily bad. I mean, if you have a lot of money, it's probably good to look poor.
Well, you're less of a if you come across as weak or whatever, then you're less of kind of a threat maybe, and there's less people who want to try and attack you. I don't know. There's probably a strength in looking weak, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say that it's true that if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you either. So you have to, if you want other people to believe in what you have to say or listen to you, which you have if you're speaking at conferences, for instance, or writing books, then you have to be confident, because otherwise other people will perceive you as weak and not give a crap about what you have to say.
Solzhenitsyn said, "The line between good and evil runs through every heart." Where do you draw that line?
I have a very specific answer to this.
I suppose you
Okay,
have a
let's
good
go.
Austrian answer to that one, don't you?
Yes, don't steal. And in stealing, I include like don't take other people's property, and it's including their bodies. Like don't aggress against others. It's the non-aggression principle to me is the best moral guideline we could have. Like don't steal.
Yeah, that and empathy, just, you're just treating someone as you would want to be treated, sort of thing.
What incentives drive you when you are in a position of power?
I mean, I guess you find yourselves in those positions accidentally. I mean, I'm not someone who seeks it out. I don't like power over other people. I never really have. I don't like it. And it's something which I've accidentally stumbled into a few times. And I'm just very aware of not being an asshole, because at some point I've, been on the receiving end. So, yeah.
Yeah, my last Fiat job before I left my Fiat life completely was as an HR manager for a shipping company. So we had around 250 seamen employed on Danish and Swedish contracts, and I had a little team of coordinators and stuff. And so I was in a position of power then. Just as Ben said, I don't seek it out. I don't crave that. I think it's like kind of nice to not be in a position of power and be your own instead. But what incentives drove me? I mean, I wanted to be reasonable, and I wanted. I guess you want people to like you. That's a big driving force, and you know that you can't be friends with everyone, so you have to pick your fights. I think the Bitcoin space is full of bad hill to die on pickers, so they pick the wrong fights with the wrong people, and like learning what fights to take and what fights to not take is a very important skill, I think.
Yeah, when I was told that you would be interviewing us both, I was happy, because you have a very non-threatening way about you. Like, you carry yourself in a very kind way, I mean, you can when you're very good at challenging stuff, and it's I think it's a real, and we used to do it a lot with the kids when we used to teach the kids, is de-escalating behavior, and not actively not appearing threatening. Like going in with if someone's trying to attack you, you go shoulder, you give them your shoulder, and you go put your hands up, and just lots of non-threatening body language. And I think it's a kind of some secret sauce, because it makes people feel comfortable with you, and then they'll open up to you, they'll trust you. So rather than be threatening, I think it's kind of more powerful to be non-threatening, I think.
Absolutely, and right back at you. I mean, you don't come off as threatening either, the
Good.
opposite. And there is great power in that. I mean, if you want people to open up, and it's about opening up yourself. There's risk to that, but like if you treat people with respect and you listen to them and you open yourself up to them, then the likelihood that they will treat you nicely back is higher.
So when principles and incentives clash, which one usually wins?
The lower your time preference, the more utilitarian your principles become. So a principled approach towards, ethics, morals, and how you tackle the world is the longer your time horizon, the better it is to be that way. So if you have integrity, it will pay off somewhere down the line. It's just that it will take a long time. I have many of the people I respect the most in the Bitcoin space are this way. Hodlonaut is a great example of it. He's been very, very principled from the get-go and never lost his reputation. And you can sort of tell bad actors by people who's claiming that he has a bad reputation, because the opposite is true. So like integrity, especially on a Bitcoin standard, like your reputation, your integrity, that is the second best, or rather Bitcoin is the second best and your integrity is the best.
I agree. I mean, what I found in Bitcoin is I have a whole bunch of people who early on I didn't really get along with, but as time wears on, because you both know, even if you just don't get on with somebody, if you existed in Bitcoin for X amount of years, you both know that you didn't choose to go shitcoin or chase some high time preference behavior, and there becomes this kind of mutual respect. I have it with Giacomo Zucca. The amount of times we've clashed, but we have kind of a mutual respect because we're still lingering around, and we have something in common that we haven't gone and, tried to seek out some short-term gain and some high time preference behavior. So no, I think Bitcoiners in general, if they've stuck around for a while and they haven't done the sort, I mean, we could all go shitcoin, we could all go and try and chase a quick buck. And it's a thing actually in which you see more and more with the crony capitalism stuff now, is that kind of hustle culture where it's like consequence free, just scam everyone, like maybe it's the wrong use of the word, but all the there's the scammers, the phone scammers and the online scammers and whoever else. There seems to be just like grab money no matter what, no matter what the consequences.
People seem to think it's an okay behavior, which it absolutely really isn't. It's theft.
Have you ever seen power destroy someone?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, do you know? This is an example. I would say you like, but you don't like. But the heavy hand of state when it came to some of the kids I would work with who had pretty dysfunctional families, but the heavy hand of state would go and rip those families apart. And some of it was absolutely heart-wrenching. I had a girl I used to teach. She was fantastic. And she was from a very big family. And she was like 10 kids or something. And they would all kind of take care of each other. And her mum was a bit loopy, but, it was a functional family. A bit weird, but functional. And they didn't go to school, and she used to take care of her younger siblings. But they were incredibly polite kids. And they were all, well educated. But the mum didn't follow by the rules. Anyway, the state went in and ripped that family up and separated all the kids. Because it was argued that the older kids shouldn't be taken care of. The older kids shouldn't be acting like parents to the younger kids. So when I was teaching this girl, she was like a parent who'd had a child ripped away from her. It was absolutely horrendous, heartbreaking. And she ended up in real bad spot. I mean, she's since recovered and she's okay now, but that is really an abuse of power. And a lot of it was the ego of the social workers and the people who were involved in that family, where they thought that they could go in and just manage that family. It was terrible, awful.
I'd say political power destroys lives every single minute of every single day. The easiest example is wars. Like if you follow a natural law ethics framework, if someone kills someone in your family, you're allowed to kill the killer. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with that from a eye for an eye, like ethics framework. But you're not allowed to kill anyone else. And wars is always about killing everyone else. Like
sending your youngest and finest to go kill them.
Yeah. There's nothing. There's no ethical grounding for being able to. You can't rationalize someone having the power to kidnap 18-year-olds and send them to kill other people. It's never okay. Like it's just wrong on so many levels. And the only way to end war is to stop funding the people who engage in it.
How much of power is real and how much is just perception?
It's all perception, I'd say.
All of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
I mean, there are so many layers to this.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even know to which extent the mind creates objective reality. So I mean, we could go endlessly deep into that rabbit hole. But I say power, there's a lot to that saying, power resides where people believe it resides.
So do you fight power or try to make it irrelevant?
Yeah, second, try and make it relevant. I think that's the I mean, with the tools we build, I think when anyone finds, the sorts of ecosystems we work in, and we realize that it can have net positive for humanity, and much of that is by just taking the power away from people who control money printing or whatever else, or control something like Twitter or something. So yeah.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. I mean, that's why we're here. We're using fiat as little as possible and Bitcoin as much as possible, Nostr as much as possible. We're taking away power from the people by peacefully just opting out. And that's crucial that it's peaceful. It's a peaceful revolution for every man, woman, and child on earth.
It really is. I mean, it's an incredibly profound thing. The fact that there is an opt-out.
Incredible, yeah.
Because it wasn't for
no,
forever,
there never was.
Yeah.
And it was sort of unimaginable that there would be one.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people have such a hard time grokking Bitcoin. Yeah. Because they think money that no one controls is like, it's too big of a change in the brain to think that way.
Right. Back to Nietzsche. He wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself doesn't become a monster. Can you beat power without becoming it?
Yeah, I mean, it's passive, isn't it? It's like you say, you're working on tools which, I mean, they liberate yourself, but then they also help liberate your friends. And then the byproduct of that is it attacks power bases and centralized power. So it's not a direct attack of centralized power. It's not like you're trying to assassinate Putin or something, but you're creating the ecosystem, the apparatus, which could lessen their power, you know?
Yeah, you're defunding them. It's more defense than offense.
Yeah,
and I don't think what we're doing in the Bitcoin space, all of us, like it's the most beautiful, most peaceful revolution ever. And I mean, I wish people had more mustaches like Nietzsche, because that's kind of cool mustache. But
It's a very cool mustache.
So what's harder, breaking a system or replacing it?
You can't turn things upside down and expect them to be replaced by something else. You really want to slowly transition, because when things change suddenly, it's very disruptive for humans. Yeah. And this has happened a lot. We've seen it happen a lot.
Completely disagree.
Really?
And I hear this view a lot, and I have the opposite view. I think we can't reach hyper-Bitcoinization fast enough, because what it actually means whenever you get someone on the Bitcoin standard, that means that person is now free and there is no aggression there anymore. So all it means is like you remove aggression from the problem, from the equation together. All it means is less violence. So why wouldn't we want it to go as fast as possible? Like this is the mechanism. And I reacted to a word there. You said replace a system.
Yeah.
I think replace is sort of the wrong way to see it, because that sort of implies that there's another system. What we're doing is just freeing ourselves from a system of control, but we're not replacing it with a system of control. We're replacing it with a language to which we can express value to one another in. And that is Bitcoin. It's much more akin to a language than a technological innovation. It's a way to interact with other people and express value to them. So we found a way to make communication a more powerful tool than hitting the other guy over the head and taking his stuff. And the revolution can't come fast enough.
I agree they can't come fast enough, but I also want it to be slow, because if it's fast, it means that kind of the shit's hit the fan and we'd have to switch to a Bitcoin standard.
It will quickly. Anyway.
I mean, I think you're probably right, yeah. But
I don't think that's Bitcoin's fault. But I
want it to be slow, because I want it to ease into this thing.
Okay, so this is the analogy. I don't think the Titanic would sink faster if there were more people in the lifeboats. In fact, it would sink slower because the lifeboats wouldn't pull it. There wouldn't be extra weight from the lifeboats, and that's how I see Bitcoin. Like, even if there are people who are not yet leaving the system, they would also be better off if there are more Bitcoiners around, because just everything gets better. Like there are literally no negatives to this if done properly.
What are the signs a system has lost its edge?
Often you see it with it just being technologically irrelevant. You know, like if you look at a lot of institutions which were founded hundreds of years ago, and they haven't adapted at all. I mean, democracy is a good example. Like, you have representative democracy because it was very hard to vote a lot. So then a lot of people attack democracy, but it's actually like the form of democracy we have is really clunky. And a lot of the things, I mean, like, as an example, and something like taxes too. You could have a tax at point of sale in a shop where you could vote where your tax goes when you buy your coffee, and then you have it's almost like a voluntary tax, because it's like a value-added tax on some services. It's just the fairer of the taxes, which I prefer, but then you would also vote at the same time. It could be where you want your money to go, whether it be defense, education. But there's all these ways in which you could just, when it's lost its edge, for me, it's when something was built 200 years, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and it just hasn't adapted for the modern reality in which we live in, with the technology we have access to.
Signs that it has lost its edge. There's a lot to unpack in those words. What is the edge of the current system? I don't know if it ever had an edge.
But I guess it's at one point because historically the transition of power was always horrendous, bloody, brutal.
It's the fourth turning thing, and the signs are that society is in decay in terms of culture, and like, if you look at moving pictures from London 100 years ago. People are more well-dressed and they behave more well-mannered than they do today. And I think that is largely a product of the fiat monetary system, where we're incentivized to overspend and not think things through. Higher time preference means cultural decay, inevitably.
Yeah. What's more destructive to a movement, the enemies outside or the chaos within?
I mean, that plays into what you've been talking about with Core and Hodl. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure I quite like Core, so I'm kind of on the other side of the fence. But I also understand there are concerns. But the free and open source is messy. Things get messy. But yeah, chaos within can cause a lot of damage.
Depends on what system you're talking about.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about Bitcoin specifically, I think there are both outside threats and inside threats. And the only way forward, if you want to defend, you have to defend yourself against that. And by doing so, you also defend the network. So the more you learn about it, the more you decide to actually run a node and validate your incoming transactions, the more of a say you have in the direction of the network, right? So do what you can to enforce whatever. Enforce is also a weird word in Bitcoin, because everything is voluntary, so there's no real enforcement of anything. But the more levels you participate on, the more influence you have, I guess. So and I think it's the responsibility of each and every user to take that to heart and understand that there is no free lunch. If we want this to work, like, Bitcoin is not backed by energy, it's backed by Bitcoiners. It's backed by its users. The work proven is being proven to Bitcoin's users. That's who we prove the work to. So that's the underlying layer, I think.
I think there is a concerted effort by state to corrode Bitcoin from the inside.
Yeah.
And it's something we shouldn't, and it sounds conspiratorial and people smirk when you say it, but like the cypherpunks, when they're challenging the laws around cryptography, they were heavily infiltrated by, alphabet agencies. And suddenly we start building this fuck you money, which is going to attack all the power structures around the world. And we're like, there's probably no spooks in here. And it's, I always say that the before you would see some random people at a conference who just clearly had that vibe that they were cops. But I would say
suits and sunglasses.
Yeah. But now I think there's people on stage. There's, we're pretty infiltrated. But I mean, it doesn't matter because they can't do anything. But they could try and change the narrative and push it in one direction or the other. But like trying to change the direction of a fast-flowing river. This is a technology which touches upon, there's lots of criminals who use Bitcoin. There are, and it's a technology which also gives people access to private money and transactions they can do outside of banking in the state and nation states, and it circumvents tax collection. So I would say that there's probably huge efforts by governments to try and get involved in Bitcoin and change the narrative and.
For instance, just look at how state-subsidized mainstream media outlets portray Bitcoin. And they say that it's going to boil the oceans and it takes up more energy. That whole narrative sort of died when everyone started using AI. But there's always this, it's only used for criminals and all that. If you look at those media outlets are in bed with the state, and that's why they say the things they say, and they are going to try to stop it. They are going to try to besmirch it with slander, but it's not going to work because we stay vigilant.
And similarly, you can spin the narrative from within that Bitcoin's just a store of value and it shouldn't be anything else. Not put your fingers.
No.
Does a system need enemies to keep going?
Yeah. Oh, it hardens it, doesn't it?
No.
I mean, it does harden it. I feel like for Bitcoin to work at scale and not just be kind of co-opted or actively co-opted by some state-sponsored mining operation, whatever else, I feel like we need lots of sparring partners and to go through all these different cycles of it being attacked, and it gets kind of harder. And
sure, there's an argument to be made that Bitcoin becomes more robust because of it being attacked every single day. Yeah. So absolutely, I buy that. But the question is, can a system work without enemies? Like, of course, if there are no enemies to the system works by definition.
Oh, right, yeah, true.
So if I if I can trust Ben with a money printer, and I trust him enough that I know that he's never going to print more money, then that system by definition works if it has no enemies. Like
you can't. By the way, you can't totally trust me.
No, I know.
Bitcoin rejects rulers. What does power look like in a decentralized system?
Okay, so the word decentralization here, I view decentralization as an unfortunate means to a greater end. It would be much better if we could just trust Ben with a money printer, because that system would be way faster, way leaner, and much, much easier to program, right? But the reason we need the decentralization is because we can't trust human beings with a money printer. The history is full of examples of that. It never worked because it attracts the psychos. So therefore, we need it to be decentralized. But decentralization in itself is not. It's not like a noble goal for everything. Hierarchies are very functional, like meritocratic hierarchies function very well in society, and decentralization for decentralization's sake is not. It's not something to just strive for because you like the word. I think it's much easier if you view decentralization as an unfortunate means to a greater end in Bitcoin. That greater end being censorship-resistant money with a finite supply. Yeah, because that allows society to function optimally in every other single way. That system is super powerful and empowering to people because it's censorship resistant and finite.
Is Bitcoin decentralization a technical property or a human discipline?
I guess it's kind of both. We built it, the humans built the thing. There was enough experimentation with Digicash, eGold, and whatever else to realize that this thing which came next couldn't have points of failure, which is why when you see a point of failure emerging, you start to, naturally as Bitcoiners, you start to become suspicious of it, and people start to try and attack the point of failure.
I'd say it's impossible to say at any point in time, if we're going to be autistic answer to that question, is that we have historical events which point to Bitcoin being decentralized enough, specifically the outcome of the block size wars. That's where I was convinced that this actually works. Yes, and many with me. So I think we have empirical evidence that it has been decentralized enough in the past. However, at any point in time, you can never know that it is still decentralized enough. There's no you have to make your own judgment as to whether it's decentralized enough to be robust or not. Because at the end of the day, it's entirely dependent on people buying hardware and running software and doing that voluntarily. That without human beings, there is no Bitcoin.
What's Bitcoin's most underrated power?
I think probably underrated is just the whole concept of something that's scarce, that's digital. Because before Bitcoin didn't exist, everything could be copied. And to have something now which is scarce and can be pinned to a certain point in time has value which we can't even comprehend. How do you feel about so I know commodity money, like a gold or something, partly, my interpretation of a commodity money would be that it also has additional commodity use cases, like Indian wives wearing. But that's what gives gold some stability. Is it's not just being used for trade, or it's not just being used for...
What gives gold its value is its stock to flow ratio, which is low, meaning that the existing stock is always very big in comparison to what amount of gold is being mined per day.
Isn't that because it's kind of used for jewelry and dentistry and electronics?
The jewelry use cases and the industrial use cases make gold a worse form of money, because it's leakage to other values, and it makes gold more volatile, harder to make economic calculations in. And also that gold who's now being worn around Beyonce's neck cannot be used for trade.
But I thought that...
So this is very similar to Bitcoin, because if I answer your question, the most overrated property of Bitcoin is that you can put shit data in it, that it's being promoted as something noble or good, and it's crap. The most underrated, I think, is this very notion of information as money, because if you think deeply about that, it means that all owning Bitcoin means is keeping a secret from other people. So I don't really think you can own Bitcoin, but you can act as if you own them by keeping a secret from other people, either your actual private key, your 12 words, the location of your hardware wallet, the PIN code. Doesn't matter. It's always a secret. And you also need to think that you also need to believe that no one else has access to the same key. And you also need to believe that the system is robust enough to not change its fundamental properties over a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
and if you believe those things, if those 3 criteria are met, then you can act as if you own Bitcoin and start trading with people, interacting with people in a way that simply wasn't possible before this. And I think that's brain money is the most underrated aspect of it in that sense.
Yeah, the bearer quality of Bitcoin, it's very much
bearer
like,
asset. Yeah,
yeah. But
the information about the asset is
you
the
don't
asset.
in fact, own. You just own the right to pass on the ownership of it.
I did a video about this, or I wrote an article about it, and Joni Appelberg made the video called "Bitcoin is Element Zero," which was inspired by a talk by a great German Bitcoiner called Jörg Hermsdorf, where I describe Bitcoin as a weightless element on the periodic table. So it's only electrons and no neutrons or protons. And the information about the element, if you remove all the weight from the element, the information about the element becomes the element. But it still has the same properties as other elements on the periodic table has, because it's hard to break it. It like has.
I like the way that we always, there's always a new way to describe Bitcoin.
Yes, and also Bitcoin is a potato.
Who holds the power in Bitcoin and who only believes they do?
I always say the users hold the power and the miners think they have the power. But
yeah.
And that's actually lots of Bitcoiners think. I think the users hold the power and the miners think they have the power.
Yeah.
But really they're just hired muscle. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
And also Bitcoin Magazine thinks they have power, but they don't.
What did governments and institutions miss about Bitcoin early on?
They didn't kill it in time.
No, they could have shut it down super early on, but just killed everyone.
Yeah.
What's their power now?
Governments?
The power of institutions and governments.
As long as people still believe that the threat is real and that they can't circumvent it, they have power. It's in the eye of the beholder.
Let me play you a clip.
There are a lot of core developers who are, amazing core developers who are completely just sort of like rich from being in Bitcoin for so long. And then there's the opposite too, where there's like core devs who don't have enough money. And so like in either sense, I wonder if, BlackRock and, some of the powers that be are going to make a move on some of these people and see them as assets for XYZ agenda that I don't necessarily understand. But I would imagine the agenda would be more towards compliance, more towards sort of KYC regimes. And they know that like you can't encroach all at once on Bitcoiners, because Bitcoiners are very we're beaked up. We're everything we view as a threat. So you'll have to encroach very slowly. But if they can affect the development process as like their quotes good guys, even if it's like benign at first, I think unfortunately that grows into something that's not benign in the future. So you just have to be worried about the sort of moneyed influence we have here.
I think back to the discussion we had about grants and foreign aid and stuff. As soon as you introduce grants to Bitcoin core developers, you also introduce this corruptibility attack vector. Now, I'm not saying that this is already corrupt. But I'm not saying that you can prove that it's not corrupt either, because both are true. Like as soon as Bitcoin developers develop Bitcoin for other reasons than to just secure their stacks, you are introducing a point of failure that wasn't there before. Like there is now an incentive problem.
And what's the alternative?
The alternative is to just hope that developers are interested enough and have enough of a stack to just keep on developing themselves. I mean, you see here like this very conference full of developers, and it's funded by all sorts of organizations that do good. I mean, the intention is always good in the beginning, but everyone in the at this conference has been spoiled in the sense that a lot of money has been spent on getting them over here, and hotel rooms and flights and food and whatnot. That is introducing another incentive to become a developer. So you now, if you're a Bitcoin developer, you may do that because you want the hors d'oeuvres at some conference and the goodie bags that are given to you from these grant giving companies instead of doing it for more selfish reasons, which I think creates a better like power dynamic within core. Like I think core was more based before because this was more true. Like the core developers did it because they had passion for Bitcoin. They had stacks and they did it for those reasons, not because they got a grant from some semi-corrupt institution sometimes. And I think this is a more dangerous attack vector than people realize. And I think we are of a slightly different opinion here.
Yeah, no, I kind of appreciate a lot of the work Core do. And as a free and open source project, I see the repo and you look through the issues and the PRs and whatever else, and it seems pretty well reviewed. And I know some of the core developers, and Peter Wuller or Jonas Nick, and a lot of them, the incentive is there because they just want to work on solving really hard problems. And the hardest problems are in Bitcoin, which is why it pioneers, new cryptographic schemes, Spec32, whatever else. So I think that the primary motivation for a lot of people who work on, it's the same reason I work on Bitcoin stuff, is because I work on business, I like building stuff, but I think they work on Bitcoin because they just want that really hard challenge of just trying to fix. It's the reason that Isaac Newton was the one who came up with the gold standard. Like really smart people want to work on solving a problem, and within maths, cryptography, everything else, like Bitcoin's this great opportunity to try and solve those problems. And I think that corruption, you could try and buy them, but they're really smart people and they basically do whatever they want, work wherever they want and get paid a decent sum of money. And it's the autism in them which just makes them want to work on Bitcoin.
If there are outside funding mechanisms, not saying that I want this to be forbidden or something, and that core developers shouldn't be able to make money other ways than holding the stacks, like none of that. It's just like if like 99% of the core developers are funded from one single organization or two,
or company,
that requires you as a node runner to be more vigilant and do your homework more, you can now not view them, you cannot trust them to the same extent that you could when they were only doing it for the passion of the thing. Mm-hmm. I think there's an attack vector there.
It's definitely something we should always be aware of and always have our eyes peeled for. And any sign of it, it should be spoken about publicly, which I think people do now with their concerns.
Iran is reportedly using Bitcoin for maritime insurance in the Strait of Hormuz. What does that tell you about Bitcoin's power?
First of all, Iran can't hold any Bitcoin. Some guy in Iran holds the Bitcoin. So that's the first thing. Bitcoin is going to be used in all sorts of weird ways. And Bitcoin is for enemies. It's not for enemies of Bitcoin, but it is for enemies in the sense that it's better for the world probably if that guy in Iran accepts Bitcoin than if he doesn't. Of course it is.
It's kind of inevitable that countries are going to trade in Bitcoin. They don't want to trade in USD. Actually, this is where Keynes was right, by the way. So with the bank or Keynes, where Keynes was right.
Why?
About what?
So when Bretton Woods happened and he met with his counterpart, his US counterpart, Keynes said that the British pound was a world reserve currency, and by it being the world reserve currency, the Brits backed it pretty horrendously in the period in which it was the world reserve currency. And then he said that to ensure peace, which was Bretton Woods was all about, was they've just been through the 2 world wars. Keynes also predicted the Second World War, by the way, because he wrote a book about it. That the Germans couldn't repay the debt, so you should never have a debt who can't repay the debt, so it'll go bad and there'll probably be another war. So he predicted
which
that
every
too.
country has in 2026,
yeah, totally.
Except 3.
So during Bretton Woods, Keynes' suggestion was this thing which he came up with, which was called the Bancor. And the Bancor was a basket of assets which countries would be able to trade with, which would kind of keep a stable price peg by it being this basket of assets. And he said that was one of the only ways in which to ensure long-term peace was that for a country not to have the world reserve currency. But then Harry Dexter White, his counterpart in the US, said, well, we own 50% of the world's economy because they'd flooded the economy with US dollars during the war period, and they made a lot of money off the back of the Second World War. And then, quite rightfully, Harry Dexter White said that the Europeans had pulled us into 2 world wars, so we're not going to trust you guys. We'll use the US dollar. Interestingly, Harry Dexter White was a Soviet spy, but I don't know what the connection is there. But I think in that regard, Keynes was right. I think that one of the biggest drivers for peace, and probably its most under-talked about property, which you mentioned before, is its ability to act as a political medium of exchange between countries and to not have a world reserve currency, because it's too much of a burden for one country to bear on their shoulders. And we're seeing it, people unhappy with the US and the USD and the US and the dollar. So they're moving to the BRICS, but the BRICS group can't really trust each other. So eventually they'll just reach the same conclusion everyone else will reach, that why don't we just use Bitcoin? And then when you see countries like Iran accepting Bitcoin, to me, it's just the beginning of that. I think it's going to coincide. There's going to be a bunch of things which coincide. I think we're due for like the wave, the great adoption, both in public sector, the governments and private sector as well, and then also individuals in Bitcoin. But I like them accepting Bitcoin for the Strait of Hormuz. Did you see it made it onto BTC Maps? That was funny. Someone put the pin.
What happens when governments realize Bitcoin can't easily be stopped anymore?
They use it, and they'll use it, and they'll use it to just get away from the USD hegemony.
It's also important to remember that the government is not an entity. There are people who work in the government or for the government, and they are also all incentivized to hop onto a Bitcoin standard because their lives would be better if they did. So it's not about the government realizing it. It's about people in government individually realizing stuff. And when we have a Bitcoiner in every office, a Bitcoiner in every institution, that's a great thing, and that's how we win. So just this notion that the government is nothing but a cabal of people with bad incentives or that it's an entity of its own, like, don't buy into that. Iran can't own Bitcoin. Some guy in Iran can own Bitcoin. I mean, it's not a corporation. MicroStrategy has no Bitcoin. Some guy at Coinbase has all those Bitcoin, allegedly. Like, and it's like, this is the shift in the power dynamic. And if you work in government, you're incentivized to not get this at all time. So I think the people who work for government now that do get it, eventually they will not quit their jobs and do something productive with their lives instead of making other people's lives hell.
I think when countries do start trading using Bitcoin as a political medium of exchange, it creates this incredibly strong dynamic that none of them want it to fail and be owned by the other country. So there'll be this like, it's almost like mutually feared destruction from nuclear weapons or something. And at that point is when I think the nation state attack on Bitcoin will start to end.
Yeah, I did a presentation and also another video about the similarities between Robert Oppenheimer and Satoshi Nakamoto. And the basic thesis is that they both figured out clever ways of using physics to change human incentive structures. And Oppenheimer in a very, very nasty way by creating the atomic bomb, and Satoshi by creating like the literal opposite of the atomic bomb, which is like, you have no reason to attack me now.
Is Bitcoin an escape from politics?
Yes.
Or the most political invention of our time?
An escape. 100% an escape. It's the remedy to politics. It's the antidote to fiat. It's the antidote to politics. It's the opposite of it. It's the remedy.
Do you think Bitcoin is quite political as well?
It is also very political within the Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, but that's good. I mean, you kind of want, debate. It's not political in people aren't being voted in or whatever, but it's there is political debate, and people stress their arguments, whatever.
Yeah, but I don't view it like that. Less politics is better than more politics, and politics is. I wouldn't view anarcho-capitalism as a political ideology, and I wouldn't view a Bitcoin standard or hyper-Bitcoinization as a specific ideology. It's just people realizing that they don't have to surrender to thieves. That's it. Like, popularity contests do not make theft more ethical. Like, democracy is has the same moral framework as gang rape. Most people involved in it think it's a good idea, and that does not make theft more ethical. So Bitcoin is the literal antidote to that. You don't have to defend yourself with physical weapons anymore. You can defend yourself by simply not being a target.
So I would fall on the other side of that probably. I want more democracy and probably more politics in everyday life and relationships with people.
Why?
That's the kind of anarchist it's not less democracy, even though you get rid of the superstructure of a nation state. That you push democracy down, so it's bottom-up democracy as opposed to top-down democracy, which is then oppressive.
Okay, so how do you define democracy then in that sense?
I mean, democracy is a huge umbrella of different disciplines. The democracy, which I think you're talking about, which I agree with, should be destroyed as representative democracy. But direct forms of democracy, e-democracy, I mean, the open source stuff we do is a form of democracy.
Okay, so I can love the idea of people getting together and voting on something if they are the property owners of what they're voting about, and if it's all consensual. But as soon as there's any coercion in it, it's unethical and it's bad for humanity. So I don't believe anything we say. Like, this is the greatest, maybe the hardest pill to swallow, is that democracy is not at all what it's been advertised to us as. Because in reality, it's gang rape.
Democracy, it's just coerced, man. It's the democracy that the umbrella of democracy has lots of different parts to it. Some parts of it aren't so great, and they have been coerced and used for just power dynamics and controlling people. But the very concept itself is a miracle that humans can get together, change a thing without killing each other. So
yeah, but
look at human history.
But I can subscribe to the idea, the original idea of democracy, which is
Greek democracy or
property
something,
owners getting together. But if you didn't have skin in the game, why the fuck would you have a voting right? Like,
because you're a citizen who lives in a place.
You will obviously vote for stealing the other guy's stuff, and I don't think that's a good incentive. I think that's.
I mean, you could be voting to put some flowers on the side of the street. Well, this is why I'm here, because it's important that I wave this little lefty flag and I get my lefty buddies to use Bitcoin as well.
And I can sit and
what did you think about this?
Why you're wrong.
It reminds me a lot of when me and Fit Jeff, we first started working on Diagon Alley, the marketplace, which kind of would later become Nostr. And I was working on it because I wanted to take more of the value of the production and give it to the producer. So I'm working on it from some Sawyer, socialisty type. And Fairjack's working on it because he wants censorship resistant marketplaces. But it doesn't matter, because we're building a decentralized marketplace. So I think as long as we're building the same thing, and as long as we're dismantling structures of oppression, it really doesn't matter what political ideology you come from. And there is a no true Scotsman thing which exists in Bitcoin and has for a long period. And it's bollocks. Like, there's no such thing as a Bitcoiner. There's some people who use Bitcoin, some people who don't use Bitcoin. And you can't say no true Bitcoiner would eat bread. No true Bitcoiner would be a socialist. No true Bitcoiner would be this. No true Bitcoiner would be that. I know plenty of Bitcoiners who
you can be vegetarian and a Bitcoiner.
You could be a vegetarian and a Bitcoiner, yeah.
What's the use of the word if you can't differentiate between a Bitcoiner and a shitcoiner?
Because if we want the whole world using Bitcoin, it's not like we're going to change the ideology of the whole world. You're not going to turn all the Democrats Republicans because you want them to be Bitcoiners.
Okay, so another rant about how Bitcoin fixes politics and removes it altogether. Because if I'm an aggressor, regardless if I'm a highway robber or the government or a Mexican drug cartel, I can point a gun at your head and say, "Give me all your money," and you can then choose in today's, like in a world where Bitcoin doesn't exist, you're sort of forced to give up whatever the attacker wants from you. With physical assets, that's true. If you have 99% of your wealth in your head, meaning the location of a hardware wallet or the actual 12 words, it doesn't matter what it is, you can give the attacker a portion of your Bitcoin, and the attacker cannot ever know how much you actually had. And this is true for every single person on Earth right now. So aggression has become more costly. Then again, thieves are not the smartest people in the world, and you have all these $5 wrench attacks in France and stuff. So during the transition, Bitcoiners will be attacked. Like, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that if you zoom out and you stretch the thought vector as far into the future as possible, you come to a world where stealing people's stuff simply doesn't make sense anymore, because it's more costly than what you're getting out of it. And if number goes up forever, which means that purchasing power goes up forever, which Bitcoin will do if it just keeps working, that means that sooner or later, all the 99% of your wealth will be in your head, because there's no way that can't happen. So it changes the dynamics of violence. and the economics of aggression to such a mind-blowing extent, and we've only begun to scratch the surface of how revolutionary this is. I think to me that long-term perspective is like it gives me actual hope for world peace. Like world peace used to be a cliche, and we had Live Aid and stuff in the 80s, and help the children and all this. But it's actually possible now, because world peace means that there cannot be taxes or inflation if we have world peace, because then that's not peaceful.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack, but I mean, like there's some things I could probably challenge you on, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead, please.
No, not really. It's just the nature of taxes, and not everyone in Bitcoin thinks the same, and that's okay. You know, like it's meant for everybody, and it will make the world a better place. And however which way direction we're coming at it, we will have a more peaceful world by the world using Bitcoin.
Yeah, and sure, I'm a hopium monger, and as you can hear, but I paint with a broad brush, and I make this bigger points to make a point, like to actually.
But what I mean, the often used in politics and around the world, UK, US, is this idea of just hope is the hope and change. Obama's hope and change, and where's the hope? And then you give people hope, and they'll vote for you, and then you realize they're just a corrupt politician like anyone else. But I think a lot of Bitcoiners, when they find Bitcoin, they have that. They realize that for whatever reason, it could be apolitical medium exchange between countries. It could be making getting tax from people harder. It could be from creating free markets, whatever. They realize that this base technology, this thing we're all using day in, day out, money, if we can make that better, then the world will probably become a better place and a safer place. And then I think that's when you're stuck. Then you can't undo it. You can't not become a Bitcoiner.
What trade-offs do Bitcoiners refuse to admit they are making?
I mean, it's a lot of. If you go fully down that rabbit hole, it's a lot of intellectual capacity and thinking time, which is a trade-off because you could be doing other stuff. Your brain doesn't have to be utterly consumed with this Bitcoin thing for large portions of the day. So that's probably a trade-off. It's a bit of a mind virus, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
A few final questions. Ben, what belief did you have before Bitcoin that you no longer believe now?
Just that I knew what I was talking about. Probably I was before I thought I knew what I was talking about, but then more as time wears on, you just have to assume that you don't know what you're talking about. But that's the Socratic thing again.
You're winning the humble competition here.
See, that's what I do, because then you can't attack it.
Oh, that's a very beautiful answer.
Knut, has power ever changed you in a way you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, it's more like learning about this stuff and realizing that you've been enslaved for most of your life and breaking out of it. So the disillusionment of power has changed my life more than power.
Yeah. To both of you, what part of the Bitcoin space keeps surprising you?
I'd say it's innovation just in tools and stuff. I mean, that's kind of the world I exist, is the building of things. But I would just say that just when you think that, maybe there's not a solution for a problem, someone comes up with some great new, novel, interesting solution. So yeah, that's what I love. I love, the new technology which emerges from solving problems.
Unfortunately, I would have to say that public Bitcoiners keep disappointing me over and over again, because many of them turns out after 5 or 10 years that they were bad actors all along. And that happens a lot, because I think the thing with Bitcoin is it's the best money ever made. So it attracts all the best people in the world and all the worst people in the world, because everyone and the worst people being people who just want to take other people's money and stuff. So it attracts both. And of course, the psychos, like, they don't reveal themselves immediately. And some people aren't even psychos. They get corrupted over time. They play other games. If your main income is to be a YouTuber and your YouTube channel is doing great, so that outperforms your Bitcoin stack in terms of how much value you get out of it, then you're living in a different incentive structure than someone who's just happy with their stack and doesn't want to change anything. So the thing that keeps surprising me, this is negative, and that's bad, but it's based Bitcoiners like losing their principles, and it can be very disappointing,
And
especially when it's people you thought you knew.
and on that as well is also whatever new billionaire we have come into the ecosystem, the amount of people who just sort of hop on them as some sort of thought leader. And I'm just like, they're probably just going to stab us in the back. At some point, we wait long enough.
What's your biggest fear for Bitcoin over the next 5 years?
That it breaks and goes away.
Yeah, that it gets corrupted somehow, and that people stop caring, and therefore it dies. There are many slippery slopes it could die on, but I don't know which one is the worst threat. But the biggest fear is that it dies at some point.
Yeah, some technological like discrete logarithm gets hacked or something. Yeah, like there's some bits you could pull it and just break the whole thing. So that would suck.
And finally, what does the best possible Bitcoin future look like to you?
And mine would be a Bitcoin by R. So the best it would be that we're all, you know, walking into this utopia, we're all happy. So you got the ANCAPs end up with freer markets, and then the lefties end up with big cooperatives, and it's all made possible by these tools and being able to move money around easily, and tools like Nostr as well. And so that's my future. But I'm quite an optimist in that I think humans do become freer over time, because that's the overwhelming incentive with humanity. And then also wars ending, centralized power ending, no one in particular having their finger on the nuclear button. Then I think we might get there if we manage to get through the next 50 years.
Yeah, I'd say world peace, like, because aggression makes no sense anymore. And ironically, what that leads to is more trust between people. Because if you know that the other guy has no incentive to aggress against you, you can trust them more. And the real irony there is that then you don't need money anymore. You can just be friendly to one another, and you know that the other guy is going to pay you back if you do him a favor. So the better the money is, the less we need it. And I think this is such a underrated paradox, but I can't debunk it myself. It's sort of a pet theory of mine, but I think as trust, the irony is, don't trust, verify leads to more trust, which leads to we don't need money as much.
Yeah, Marx thought the same. That's why communism wouldn't have money. Sorry.
Yes, but yeah.
To troll you there.
Marx, yeah. I'm not even going to comment about Marx. Yeah, he had a beard too.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for this generous conversation. Where can people find you and your work?
Just the usual Nostr is probably the best spot. benarc. I'm not very good at posting stuff anymore, because you just get busy working. So check out LNbits, check out Nostr.com. LNbits is very cool these days. Yeah. And then pressure me to make Nostr.com better, because it needs to be better.
Yeah. I'm at Knut Svanholm on X, and I'm primal.net/Knut is the easiest way to find me on Nostr. I have a site called bitcoininfinity.com. There's a lot of stuff coming to that in a not too far future. I guess that those are the best. And follow my podcast, the Bitcoin Infinity Show. We're done over 200 episodes, and I really enjoy the conversations I'm having there.
It's been a pleasure having you on. I can't wait to have you back. Until then, stay sovereign.